Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I decided to throw together this bonus video because the book wasn't really talking about all the fun stuff that I think genetics really should be about. And so, mutants and blood everywhere. Here's a chance to get into some really interesting stuff that really I just felt like talking about. So, first of all, mutants. All right, how many of you have been to the zoo and seen white tigers, albino tigers? Well, check it out. That's a mutation. Basically, a gene gets damaged. And when it stops functioning the way that the original gene did, we now have a new allele. So you have an orange tiger. It goes through a weird mutation that breaks or damages the gene that normally makes the orange. And now you have a tiger that still has its dark stripes, but it's white. Then you get a different mutation that might break its ability to make dark colors altogether. And then you end up with this one over here on the right, the albino tiger. So two different types of mutations that just break or damage different genes into a new allele version. All right, little bit of a side note here, but it's going to be helpful later. Ladies, because you are XX, you're going to have two larger chromosomes than the guys who would be XY. So that Y chromosome has all the DNA to be male characteristics specifically. But that X chromosome, it has female characteristics and several other important pieces of info. So both men and women get all of that. But the ladies, you get two copies of all the stuff on the X chromosome. Keep that in mind. It's going to be important here in a minute. All right, let's check out some cool mutations. In humans, there is actually a rare condition called polydactyly. I call it condition. It's actually just a genetic trait you can inherit. And you grow 6 fingers. Guess what? That's dominant, which means that if at some point one of your ancestors mutated this trait, there would be a higher probability that lots of people in your family might display that trait. And if you were to mutate it yourself, have mutated it, you would then have a high probability of passing it on to your kids, or rather of it being displayed. Tetrachromacy. So this one's also kind of cool. Basically, ladies, since you have 2 sets of X chromosomes, color vision, red and green color vision, are based on the X chromosome. So should that gene mutate into a new allele version that sees a new color frequency, then you would have your 3 colors on your normal X chromosome, and then the mutated X chromosome would see a 4th color, which is pretty crazy. Guys, if one of the chromosomes on your one of the genes on your X chromosome gets damaged or broken, you only have the one. So you're not necessarily going up to 4 colors. You might just, suffer from color blindness. All right, mutation is not always cool, but here's some interesting examples of when it's really not cool. Cancer. So cells know when to divide and when not to divide, or at least they should. But if certain genes on your chromosomes get damaged, your cell loses control and starts just growing wildly. That's how you end up with tumors, and sometimes they can become very deadly. Of course, COVID-19, I haven't really talked about it, and I'm not going to waste too much of your time on it, but this coronavirus, it's not a new virus. Well, it's new in the sense that it has one mutation change that caused it to start infecting humans when previously all those little spiky tips, all the little blue points coming out of this virus used to be only shaped to attach to animals. Once it mutates that gene into a new allele form for targeting human cells, we now have this deadly new strain that no humans have much of an immunity to. That same little protein tip does influence how well your immune system can fight it off. So when it's a brand new virus tip, our immune systems have no defenses against it yet. All right, mutant blood. So here's where things get weird. You have blood cells, red blood cells that carry oxygen around in your body, and they look like cough drops. Well, that's what they should look like anyway. But then there's these little sickle cell shaped blood cells, and that's a mutation. And unfortunately, if you have enough of those sickle cells, they can block up your arteries and veins, and it's not great. So the sickle cell mutation is a negative allele. It is a different form of the allele, and you can inherit it, but it's harmful. And so your body will make the normal blood cell as long as you have at least one version that works correctly. And that's what this idea of a carrier versus an affected person is. If you're inheriting one version from mom and one version from dad, then as long as you get at least one of the dominant healthy versions of an allele or of a gene, then you're going to be unaffected. So even the two out combinations where, say, dad gives dominant, mom gives recessive, or dad gives recessive and mom gives dominant, you ultimately will end up unaffected, not suffering from the condition, but you're a carrier, meaning in your DNA is that same gene that might cause someone else to inherit that condition. So who actually suffers from sickle cell anemia and other genetic traits? It's this group over here that gets recessive from both mom and dad, and then they are actually going to suffer from that genetic condition. Okay. Oh, wait, and this also kind of explains why a dominant allele is dominant and why a recessive allele is recessive. It comes down to what does the body do with that genetic information. So if the mutated allele is just damaged or broken and it doesn't do anything, then your cell's going to read the functioning version and use it. And that's why it's considered dominant, because if you have both, then it's really just the one that's working that you see. And the one that's not working, well, you don't see it. Okay, more about mutant blood. Hemophilia. Now, this is a cool sounding name because for Greek it means blood lover. But the point is, it's actually a flaw in the clotting or coagulation process. So when you get wounded and you're bleeding, it just doesn't stop. And that's deadly. Here's the thing. You have these little proteins that your body produces that trigger the clotting process, that block up your arteries and veins when there's blood leaking out of them. And if you mutate the protein, it's not going to be able to, the guys who only have the one X chromosome won't be able to then produce that clotting agent. Ladies, you've got two X chromosomes, which means, again, if you're getting one from each parent, then ladies, you have that chance of being an unaffected carrier. But guys, imagine if you only get one letter total. Mom is the only person who can give you an X chromosome. Your dad's giving you Y, so that's not even an option. So check this out. Queen Victoria actually lived many years, famous female monarch in Great Britain, but her kids went on to rule basically half the major kingdoms in the continent of Europe, except that several of her children inherited a trait of hemophilia. Now, she may have mutated it herself, but she only had one mutated X chromosome, which means she lived a long and healthy life. And two of her daughters that carried hemophilia also lived long, healthy lives, and nobody ever knew it. But her son Leopold, being male, only got the one X chromosome from Victoria and therefore suffered from this bleeding condition. Well, Beatrice over here had several children, and two of her sons suffered from hemophilia, even though Beatrice herself, again, lived that long, healthy life. So it was this mystery that all the descendants of Queen Victoria kept having these bleeding disorders, because back in the day, they had no idea that those ladies had the capacity to be a carrier. All right, let me just end on a bit of a personal note. Genetics can be, these Punnett squares that you were studying can be super helpful. For example, my wife's sister was herself a PHMS graduate, but she had a genetic condition called cystic fibrosis. It makes it hard to breathe because of mucus buildup. And this was a mutation of that gene. So in order for her to have been born with this genetic condition, she had to inherit two of the recessive alleles. And that means that her parents, my in-laws, must both have been carriers. So they would have the one dominant allele that allows them to live healthy lives, but they were both carrying that mutated allele. And so when they both passed the mutated allele, their daughter was born with this condition. Now, my wife, she also inherited one of the mutated alleles, but had one of the dominant healthy alleles. And that means that we were curious whether we would have any probability of passing this condition on to our children. So I went and had myself genetically tested. And when they searched my chromosomes, they did not find any mutations for cystic fibrosis. So this Punnett square would represent my family, and any future kids we have would receive at least one healthy, normal gene, one of the healthy alleles, which means that if you look at the probabilities, there is a 50% chance, 2 out of the 4 boxes, that they might inherit the mutated allele from my wife, resulting in them being carriers. However, there's a 0% chance that they would ever end up with 2 mutated alleles, since they would never get one from me. And so none of our children will ever have cystic fibrosis. All right. Well, I hope you found this interesting and enjoy the rest of our genetics unit. Bye.